Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the station. And of course, as is more typical on the station than not, you have again me with you and Lucy with you. And of course, soon it'll be to say too. And we enjoyed the format last week so much that we're going to do that same format today. And if you didn't join us last time around, what that means is that Lucy has a couple of volumes of large, very thick volumes of questions that she has sequestered away. In a matter of speaking, of course, they're ever changing. So we're going to make the session again about exploring some of those things. And again, we think that it'll lead to some nice threads that we explore as we're doing this. And of course, as always, I'm sure that Desetu will utilize whatever the topic matter is and spin it in a way that will be interesting. So I'm going to let my good buddy take a little more center stage here. And so, yeah, take just a moment. We'll do that. So once again, we would greet all of you and express, as we always do, how appreciative we are to have this interaction with all of you, because, of course, it adds to our experience of our reality. And so it's our understanding, of course, because we were listening in quite intently in the last couple of minutes of your dialogue with our friend here, that there's going to be questioning again today, which we're very much looking forward to. And so we will pause and offer center stage, if we will, once again to you. So, if you would please.
Thank you. So last week we began with what is God? And I would appreciate more clarity. I understand that we have limitations due to language. And I ask that you not be limited to culture, but bring the most expanded vantage point possible into words to describe more of this concept of God that we have. We've talked about this being all that is, but the personal experience of being an expression of all that is, and as you said last week, that means we are all gods, or God. We should clarify that. The personal expression allows us to have creative control in our lives. If my personal preference is to experience God or all that is, source, as an emanation of love, that will be my experience. If someone else has a different preference, that will be their experience of God. That's my first question.
So, define for us a little bit, if you would, what you mean in the moment when you use the word preference.
I like it more than the other alternatives that are before me. It feels better.
So, we ask that question because it allows the individuals who will be listening to hear certain words. And in those words, there's meaning to those words yet. So when you say I to many individuals, that has a particular meaning still. and it means the body that they're walking around in, the consciousness that they associate with that body, and the them that they believe themselves to be. So, in that context, when you or anybody asks about preference, and when you say you have a preference, and when you ask, who is the me that is making those choices? These are all concepts and ideas that are tightly woven together.
Mhm.
So, in terms of time, in terms of your history, you've created an experience, all of you, for yourselves, where you have a very circumscribed understanding of who and what you are, that you are your body, that certain aspects of your anatomy, your brain, have particular functions. It's only been, except for several individuals in your history, relatively recently, that the word mind has meant something different than the word brain. And an understanding that the awareness that you have, the knowledge that you have, lays someplace other than a structure that you believe rests inside of your bony encasement of your head. So, as you identify yourself as you, that identification is becoming different now than what that identification used to be a century ago, 2 centuries ago, 3 centuries ago, and so on. Because of that, when you consider your choices and when you consider the freedom you have of movement and the freedom you have of choices, because of the filters you've used to influence your choices in particular ways within this reality, the you that you understand yourself to be within this time of transition is growing. It's becoming wider. You're pulling in, perhaps we would say, a larger understanding of who and what you actually are. And in that, not only do your choices increase, but your awareness and understanding of certain concepts becomes different also. And so in this, in those time periods when you thought of yourself, and many do still, in a more circumscribed way, you had yet within you understandings, feelings that there was more to you than that. There was more to the experience than that. And so what you've done throughout your history is you've utilized various ways to interpret those feelings, those sensing states that you had, that there was more to you than what it was that you experienced more immediately. And so in Western language, you've applied the word God to that understanding, that feeling state that there's more that's out there. And because your experience is of yourself as a relatively self-contained unit, you in fact create the idea in alignment with the experience that you've had. So when individuals have said this in various ways, some people may say that we're created in the image of God, but individuals have really come to realize that what we did was we created God in our image, right? Because we were having this experience. And so then you created an experience of this expression of existence that is infinite, but it has to make some sense to you too. So you humanize it in that context. The concept is that 100 years ago, what it felt like and what the experience of being inhuman was is different than what it is now, which will be different again in another 50 years. So that means that your idea of what God is very flexible. It changes as your definition of yourself changes. And so that's what you're in the process. And you're in the process of defining yourself and changing yourself. and then that defining and changing what God is. Now, again, in our last session, we briefly mentioned that God, or all that is, or consciousness, because you could use any of those words for that, is an action. It's a continual, maybe we'll say, unfolding and then infolding on itself, which is perpetual and simultaneous. And so, what if we pull in the term, because this allows you to move yourself beyond definitions. When we say you, we mean individuals. If we use the word energy, it is helpful because you don't describe a shape or a form to energy. You see it as this free flowing action because you know that it has movement. Typically, you don't provide that it has awareness as well. But if we say that it has awareness, then we can draw a correlation between energy and consciousness. That consciousness is continual movement, continual expression, as maybe you might imagine energy might be, but it is aware, it is totally aware of all of what it's doing. Now, at the same time, so we're going to talk in terms of time because that'll make sense. So, even though consciousness is in all places, doing all things, still in its own expansion, it can create an experience in a way that is novel to itself. And it's doing this perpetually, it's doing this all the time. If you think of a pencil and the graphite that runs up into the pencil, and as you write on a piece of paper with that pencil, the words are formed by the graphite of the pencil on the paper. Before the word is formed, the potential of the word lies within the graphite, but it's not expressed until it's expressed. But it resides there, shall we say, in this metaphor. Consciousness is the same. All of what can be expressed lies as, perhaps we'll say, potential within consciousness. In the moment that it's expressed within consciousness, in whatever way it is expressed, it then becomes the expressed potential. If that makes some sense to you. So, God then is all of that expressed and unexpressed potential at the same time, expressing itself in ways that, from this vantage point, you have no idea of. But all that is really, if we use the word unimportant, what we mean is that just because you're not familiar of all of what's going on doesn't mean that your experience here somehow is missing something, because it's not. Because your experience here, in whatever way you're doing it, in the way that you used to do it 100 years ago and the way that you're doing it now, is of optimal importance, shall we say, in the moment, not only for you, but for all of consciousness. And so, many times, individuals can think, because there have been ideas that have been developed along the lines of when you express yourself in a way that is more and more, and we're just going to use this term in the moment, spiritual, that you should express yourself in a particular way. But, and there's going to be two parts to this, but because everything is energy because everything is consciousness. All expressions are always, in that term, spiritual. They can be no other. Everything is spiritual. Even if you're totally unaware that you're spiritual, still, it's a spiritual expression because it's consciousness, it's energy, it's what you are. Now, there is, however, a tendency within consciousness, the consciousness that knows itself to be consciousness, which is where all of you are heading, that as that awareness increases in the individual, the tendency then, and we'll use that word, to interfere with the expressions of others in any way, shape, or forms becomes lessened. Because you know the value of their expression from that vantage point. You no longer judge their expression, and so you allow it. And even saying it that way means that somehow you have the ability to disallow it, which you actually do not. It's only within experiences like this that it can seem like you have the ability to disallow an expression, but it really does not happen like you're not seeing the entire picture. This also is part of the theme. And by that, what we mean is seeing the entire picture. Part of what all of you are doing here is you're widening your awareness to see more of your entire picture. As you do that, all of your experiences of your physical reality are going to change, including your questions about those expressions of consciousness that you've considered to be beyond you. And one of the words you apply to that is God. So we will end our portion of that there so you can expand in whatever way you would like to.
Well, the first line of questioning still hangs there, and that is this notion of how we experience ourselves in relation to, and you're right, it's wow, I see all the belief systems embedded in the question itself. So I'm at a loss suddenly for how to frame the question about individual experience, because it
Sure,
could
because
it could
individual
it's all
experience,
potential.
from where you've come from historically, you believe individual experience is a separate experience. It's been more circumscribed than what it's becoming each day, each week, each month for individuals. As it becomes something different, you will discontinue the idea of separation between you and something that you believe is something other than you. You will understand that that's not the case whatsoever. You will no longer see a seeming demarcation between this expression of you and another expression of you. You will know that that's not the case. You will experience it as not being in the case. And so those types of explorations will no longer be part of your exploration because you will have a different vantage point then. You're moving into that vantage point, actually.
All right, so let's just put that issue or line of thinking onto a shelf for a moment and turn to vantage points that, from that perspective, can assist us if we are in physical form and feeling, for example, in the case of a friend, chronic pain in the hips and shoulders. So this is something that he's carrying into each day with a desire to be free of it, or a desire to understand it. As we talked about last week, there's less of an interest in eradicating a pain or whatever is not to our liking from the personality self. There's less of a desire to do that if we're coming from the vantage point of seeing it all as simply experience. And the power in it is the noticing, in the moment noticing of what that experience is. And still, there remains the question of what is a vantage point that you think is helpful for people to have when there is chronic pain in their body?
So Your body is a great communicator. And frequently, what will happen, and we're going to express a variety of things so that a larger understanding is had. So, in this time, this transition time that you're going through, one of the things that all of you are doing is you are becoming familiar with how powerfully in the past and still to this day, these filters called beliefs have influenced your expression of life, right? And so, in that, because in this period, what you're doing is you're learning to recognize those, you're learning to understand that you have more freedom of choice than what you've allowed yourself in the past. And you're seeing this all the time. Even if you look at something as simple as the types of jobs that people do. If you think back 100 years ago at the number of ways that people were bringing income into their life, it was very circumscribed. There are only a certain number of jobs compared to if you look around your planet now, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different types of jobs, quote unquote, that people can do. So you've allowed yourself to expand in that way. You're doing it in many, many different ways. So in that, you're getting all the time through the various communications that the more encompassing you is sending this expression of you. You're getting information all the time. You'll get little thoughts that pop up in your mind. You'll get little feeling states that show up. You'll get people that'll mention things to you. You'll hear a verse in a song, many different things. And a lot of times, those things will be in association with challenges that you have in your life, places that you're having some struggle in whatever way, shape, or form it might be. And you can be any place in that challenge or in that struggle. You may be early into it. You may be someplace in what we'll call the middle, or it may be you're deeply into it, we'll say. Okay. And it's causing you a lot of conflict, challenge. So the inner you is kind of like somebody knocking on your door of your house. They'll come up to the door, they believe you're home, and they'll knock on the door very lightly because you're there, you'll hear it, and you'll come open the door. But if you don't pay attention to that, they still need to get your attention. So you'll open the door so they can convey the message to you. So they'll knock louder and you still don't listen. And they knock louder and you still don't listen. And they're hammering on the door, right? And so your inner you will begin by giving you information in more light ways and more subtle ways, perhaps. But if you're not paying attention to any of that, it will start to utilize other forms of ways of getting your attention. Your body is very important to you. If you begin to have things go wrong with your body, you start to pay attention. Now, you may not understand why it is, as far as those types of themes are concerned, that you're having difficulties with the body, but you'll pay attention. Now, one of the things that a shoulder does for an individual is it allows all of the thing that's attached to the shoulder, the arm, to move freely, to do all the things that it does. And when you think about your world and what you do in your world, how you create in your world, most of your creating you do with your hands, which are attached to your arm, which are attached to your shoulder. If you have shoulder issues, you're not moving your arms around, you're not moving your hands around. And there's many times a theme of not allowing yourself the creativity that's there for you to be able to explore for reasons that can be different for each individual. A hip is somewhat similar. It's a place of flexibility. It allows an individual to change direction. It allows them to move from place to place. When that area of your body is impinged in any way, shape, or form, all of your movement is more painful, right? It's more difficult, or you're making it more difficult than what you have to, than what you can, than what you have to be. Now, the thing about the beliefs that you're all moving through in this time period is that some can be hard to see because you're so used to utilizing the same ones over and over and over again. You may not be able to see that this is what you're using, that this is what, in fact, is, in a sense, inhibiting you from having a different experience. Now, there will be others that are out there that will say, well, isn't all experience a valid experience? And yes, it is. All experience is a valid experience. Yet, there's nothing that says that you need to have the same experience over and over and over and over again in order to make the validity of the experience valid, to do that to the word. So, typically, when individuals have issues that are associated with their body that are powerful issues, there are situations in their life that they would really like to do differently, like they would like to move beyond. And sometimes they've identified those, and sometimes they haven't. Sometimes they've identified those, and they won't let themselves recognize that they've identified those because they are very challenging for them to explore, for them to bring
What's
change to.
what's an what's an example of that? Something
Mm.
challenging
An
to
example
explore.
of that is you have a parent, let's say a mother, and that mother has gotten, let's say you had a sibling, and that sibling passed a decade ago. And your mother found that incredibly challenging. And in that, chose not to move through the process of grief in the way that might be more typical, but chose to immerse themselves in it and stay there. And then in that, they added other things to their existence because it was difficult for them. They began drinking alcohol more and more frequently, and maybe they added other things as well. And so, as that individual being your mother, you as the child, now an older individual, perhaps in your 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever it might happen to be, you want to aid that individual. You come to an understanding at some point in time that there's nothing you can do to help that individual. But as long as you're there doing that, you're inhibiting yourself from being able to live the life that you want to live because you're putting so much time and energy into this. Your belief systems will tell you that this is your mother, and we know that this will be difficult for individuals to hear. This is your mother. She did all these things for you, or there's just that family connection, and this is what you should be doing, regardless of whether it prevents you from living your existence or not. To be able to understand that you are not the one that's going to be able to bring change into your mother's life. And to go ahead and live your life doesn't mean you need to cut all ties with your mother, but to be able to live your life is many times a very difficult thing for individuals to do because of the beliefs that all of you utilize in one area in your relationships with other individuals about how things should be done, what is right, what is wrong to be done in certain circumstances. These are all constructs that aid you in choosing the actions that you take. And this is what beliefs are in your reality. And you are quite used to using certain of these, and your ideas are some of these are right to use, some of these are wrong to use, some of these are better to use, some of these are not so good to use, those types of things. And that thinking in and of itself is another form of belief within your reality. Right, wrong, good, bad, better, worse. Why? Because it inhibits your choices. It means that only these choices should be made and these choices cannot be made. And so,
But
go ahead.
sorry. But if we circle back to the inner being knocking at the door lightly, the door of the personality self, I assume is what you're
Yes.
talking about there. It's really hard to hear that scenario and not think, well, the good thing to do or the better thing to do is to open the door and hear the
The
message
more
of the inner
the more
self.
efficient thing to do, which means
Efficient in that it gets you where? It gets you where quicker,
it.
more directly.
So we're going to use this word. In your natural state, as consciousness,
Mm.
your movement is free flowing perpetually. You don't have things that interfere with your expression in any way, shape, or form. So the ways that you express things here or have expressed things here, you experience as doing that to you, as as holding you back from having a particular experience. And in fact, within the experience, that is the experience that you're having, that they're holding you back from having a particular type of an experience. But within your reality, they're doing that because you've got beliefs that are associated with how you're making your choices. And because it's within the construct, excuse us, and because within this dimension, it's within the construct of how you've created how you want to do things in this dimension that you utilize beliefs to influence all of your choices. And they've done that quite effectively for all of you for, in terms of time, many, many, many centuries. But in that regard, within the theme of the dimension, they have served to, within your experience, limit your choices, limit your experiences, seemingly so anyway, but that's your experience. So now what you're doing is you're changing the experience. You want to have a different type of an experience. So you will still utilize beliefs, but you'll do it in an aware state. You'll do it knowing that as I choose a particular belief to align myself with, it'll mean I'll have this type of a flavor of an experience, but you'll do it in a conscious way. It won't be something that influences you without your understanding that you're being influenced by it. So, in that, even though foundationally no experience is wrong or no experience is right, there is, however, an ease of movement that you can have within your reality. A flow of your movement that is much more reminiscent of what your experience is like. We'll just phrase it like this in the moment, outside of this dimension, as you've experienced this dimension for many centuries anyway. And so in this is where all of you are moving towards. You're all aspiring to this. And so in order to do that, part of what you need to do is to recognize the beliefs that would inhibit you from doing that. And these types of experiences allow you that opportunity to recognize what it is that I'm not allowing myself to do, what choice that I'm not allowing myself to make. And almost always, you'll be able to stop and think about your life and your existence, and you'll recognize the choice that you want to make if you can be transparent with yourself in that moment. And you can even, in that point, almost always recognize how it is you're holding yourself back from making that choice. And they will be beliefs about why you should be doing things particular ways and why you should not be doing things in particular ways. And this idea of good, bad, right and wrong, better, worse is frequently at play in all of that from this perspective within that idea. So This process of neutralizing beliefs, because you're not going to be divesting yourself of beliefs, you'll be utilizing beliefs in your reality even after this shift. But it's going to be more like walking in to the ice cream shop that offers 150 or 250 flavors of ice cream. You'll just walk and you go, I want that flavor right now. And you'll come back the next day and you'll choose a different flavor. It's just choice. That's what you will do, is it'll just be choice. Now, it's like you have 5 flavors of ice cream perhaps in front of you. Your choice is not very large because your beliefs, or the way you utilize beliefs, does that to your experience. Now, that was part of the plan for many, many centuries, to have an experience that was seemingly very limited because you wanted to have that experience. But you've had that experience. So now what you want to do is you want to expand your experience again. And to do that, because you've chosen to use beliefs in this dimension, and you will continue to choose to do that, but you're going to allow yourself to use them differently than what you used to before. But without recognizing what they are, you can't use them differently. And these experiences can aid you in that.
Does this mean that the inner self has a preference for the flow state?
It's not a preference for the flow state as much as it is the actual quality of the state.
Got it.
Total choice at all times. Nothing inhibits your choice when you, from the perspective, you knowing yourself as consciousness, you choose what you want, when you want, in each moment, perpetually, continually, infinitely. That's you. That is God.
Mhm. Thank you.
Next question, please.
As the inner being, God being self, um, expressed itself into consciousness as this body or this personality or both. Where are the demarcation points, if they exist at all, between what's being expressed into consciousness by the inner self and what's being kind of developed just in relation to the human experience by the personality self?
So, the dynamic between this expression of you and the more encompassing expression of you is, and we used in a metaphor last time, we believed, like one of the ways that you utilize electricity, alternating current, goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. In a way, that's similar to what's going on. You have an experience. Your experience is, as you're having it, conveyed to you, the more encompassing you. That you understands all the connections, all the permutations of how that can then be expressed in the ensuing moment, shall we say, in your physical reality, and sends that information to you. And while it does that, it's paying attention to what beliefs you're using in the moment. And so that information shows up then in your reality in line with the filters, the beliefs that you're using in that moment. That's the way then that energy and consciousness are pulled together, that you then perceive through your senses, whether they're inner or outer senses or the combination of those, that then becomes your next experience in your next moment. So it's a constant dynamic that's going on with those, in a moment, we'll say those two aspects of you. But of course, what's happening is that, as many of you are aware, there are what you can term probable yous. Some of you may say that they're incarnational yous. Other individuals may say that there are other aspects of you. All of that to say that there are a whole variety of versions of you that are happening at the same time as this you is. And there's a continual dynamic, a communication, if you will, between all of those aspects of who and what you are that are going on, maybe we'll say behind the scenes, that lend to things that happen in this now in ways that you will become familiar with, but you are not familiar with in this particular moment. And so that dynamic, even of that back and forth, encompasses much more than what our earlier exploration talked about. If you can think of, you have a model now on your planet of computers, and your computers, maybe you have a network of 1,000 computers, and they're all attached to this one hugely powerful server. And all of these computers are being used at the same time, and they're all sending information to the server. The server has access to all this information and then sends out information to all the computers, right? This is an image that maybe you can build for yourself, right? And this information is very dynamic because individuals at all the stations, at all the monitors are adding information that are going into the system. The system then shares that information with everybody else. Everybody else is able to choose and pull from all that information. Now think if that server served 8 billion stations, monitors, like the number of people, we'll just use that number on the planet, right? That all that information is shared within your collective. And then go beyond that to all the rest of consciousness, a number that you can't even count, but it's happening immediately, which doesn't make sense for the most part because there's this tendency to think in time. But so there's this sharing of information. And of course, because you're in this theme, the layers, we'll just put it like that for now, that you tend to draw from more immediately are a little bit more associated with what you're doing here than the other layers are. Now, there can be times where you can draw information from, we'll just again use this word, a layer of consciousness that typically has nothing to do with this physical dimension. But in that moment, for the individual, that connection can have some bearing and it will occur immediately through consciousness. This is counterpart interaction, where any place within consciousness can share information with any other part of consciousness if in that moment it has some relevance to what's going on for that expression of consciousness, and it happens immediately. So there is that dynamic that's happening all the time. And again, the perspective has been that there's the me that's making choices, and then there's the me that's making choices. But a more accurate way to say that, it's the us that's making choices because those choices are happening simultaneously. The lag that you think is there is never actually there. The information that's shared with you is shared with you in the moment that you're making the choice, as if you had the choice, you presented the choice, you asked for input about the choice, and then the information showed up. You can think that that was the process, but it actually is not the process. The process is that you have the information in that moment about all the ways you could possibly make that choice. And then the leanings that you have as a result of the belief systems that are still being utilized in your experience in that moment are taken into consideration. And then your expression that you experience is due to all of that. So again, this is where an understanding of beliefs in and on themselves and the ones that you're utilizing and the tendency to use those. And again, we're going to go back to this because it's a very important one. The beliefs that say right, wrong, good, bad, better, worse. Because what they do is they do this to your choices. Now, again, in the past, that was the plan. That was the way that you set things up. You wanted to have an experience where your choices were demarcated like that. But now what you're doing is you're pushing the walls out again. You're no longer doing that to yourselves. You're doing that to yourselves less and less all the time. So anything that strongly influences your choices, that seems, we'll say, to steer your choice in another direction in a way that you have less control of, are things that you're going to recognize and then understand that really it's up to you whether you want to apply that to yourself or not. And so, again, we'll pause there.
I am almost devoid of questions at this point, but I guess there is a little curiosity coming in from here on behalf of everyone who is in this human experience, not feeling like they are getting a lot of intuitive hits, not feeling like they are connected to counterparts, not feeling any of not feeling much of the broader sense of self, but very much wanting that.
So, what we're going to suggest is please have an understanding that there is no one model of this exploration. There is no one model of how this process works for individuals. There's as many models as there are individuals on the planet. And so your process will be unique, especially if you're within that place of yourself. Your understanding of the number of influences around you may not be something that you have yet. And so you have to discover that. That more encompassing you understands how to do that for you. It may be confusing at the time, but understand that your confusion is not just because you're in that process. It's because all of you are in a process of becoming something that you're not familiar with being. You're moving into something very new. You're moving into an experience very new. Most of the people on your planet are confused. They do not know why things are happening the way they're happening. The events that happen globally on your planet occur just like events happen in people's personal lives. You move through strong challenges in your personal lives that help you to understand things about yourselves. You will do the same things, and you are doing the same things collectively. The easier all of you can make it on yourselves in your personal explorations, you will then see globally around you. Because a collective exists because it's a collective of individuals in that term, in those ways of speaking within your dimension. So utilize whatever information that you have around you, utilize whatever help that you have around you. Understand that you have a process at hand that is your process. We understand it may be frustrating at sometimes. We understand that there are many times where you may not understand why something is happening, and it may take a number of weeks or a number of months to then, in retrospect, be able to go back to that particular thing and say, "Oh, now I understand why it unfolded the way that it unfolded." Many individuals have found themselves within that position. Individuals who have explored for many years, even where why is this unfolding the way is it unfolding? Because they're used to it unfolding a different way, or they're used to having more answers. The thing is that sometimes if you have the answers that you think you should have right at your disposal, it will actually steer the way that you view something in a particular way. It won't really allow it to be as open as it could be for an actual understanding of things or an understanding beyond what you understood before. So frequently you do those types of things with yourselves. So what this really becomes about is a continual and a deepening understanding that you're in partnership with the rest of you. It's you, really, after all, and deepening that trust in you and knowing that as the experiences show up in your life, they didn't just fall into your life for no reason. They're there for you to understand something more about yourself. They're there to allow you the opportunity to view things differently. And it may be that they're there to help you understand things that you just think are the way things are, but really they're not just the way things are. They're one way of seeing the way things are. So, in the way that we expressed before, and it may not be like you see a great friend that you haven't seen for 2 months and you walk up to them and you throw your arms around them and you embrace them, but attempt to embrace the experiences that come into your life in the way of knowing that they're there for a reason. They're there to provide you with an opportunity. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. And you may not know why in the moment, which of course can be frustrating. But if you can keep yourself in that state that says that this is here to provide me with some information, if you can stay in that state, then you'll start to have that information come in whatever way works for you. It'll show up. And then you'll be able to do something with the situation. You'll be able to move it and mold it and shift it and change it. It'll become something different.
What is the relevance of prayer at a moment like that? And I mean that in the broadest sense of making a request to one's inner being to for
Yes.
assistance in revealing the purpose of an experience.
First of all, it's a great way to reinforce for yourself that that's an understanding that you have now, that there is this connectivity that happens between quote unquote this layer of you and another layer of you, right? You're saying that if you do that, you're saying, yes, there is this something else, some larger part of me, whatever you want to say, and there's a connection there. So there's that aspect of it. There's also a trust there. If you do that, you're saying that if I make this request, not only is there somebody listening, but they're going to respond, right? Then allow the response and attempt to allow the response to come in ways that might be a little different than what it typically is. So keep your radar open, maybe we'll say, right? It could be something that happens physically. It could be something that someone says in your workplace. It could be something that you see as you're walking down the street. It could be lyrics of a song. It could be a dream that you have. It could be just some impression that shows up for you. It could be these words that you read, all sorts of different things. So just kind of be aware of all of your surroundings to see how information shows up. And so utilize it in whatever way, prayer, in whatever way in that moment seems how you should do it. And it'll be effective for you. And it is part of the journey of understanding that you're more of who and what you are. And as you move into that, your idea of that, again, will shift with that. Just as if you could think back, most individuals, if you can think back to when you were younger, 10, 11, 12, you had particular ideas about cars and houses and work and life and what it was to be an adult and all of those things. And then as you moved incrementally, we'll say, year after year after year after year after year, closer to that, and you moved into that experience and you had all of the experiences that led you into that experience was something different than what you thought it was from that vantage point. This is the same thing. All of you are moving into that experience. And so, whatever way in the moment seems to be a way that you should express yourself to be helpful for you, we're going to suggest do that. And you'll find it helpful. But then as you move forward, shall we say, within time, you may alter that somehow in whatever way, shape, and form that does. And then again, as you do that, that will be helpful for you.
Thank
So
you.
welcome.
Any final remarks?
No, actually, there really isn't any sweeping final remark. Just if you can, trust yourself, trust your process, and attempt to allow communications that maybe haven't been part of your experience before. And you may not recognize them right away, and you may start to pick up on them eventually. And then little by little, maybe they'll become an increasing part of what your palette is of ways that you get information from those broader, more encompassing parts of yourself, whatever you'd like to call it. So that would be it for us today.
Thank
Yes.
you.
So as we have in the past and we'll do now, we of course wish all of you well, and hope that your exploration of yourself is one that is increasingly enjoyable for you. So we will leave you with that.